Hello, and welcome to the Cycle Endometriosis podcast, where we will delve deep into experiences, challenges, and triumphs of those navigating a life with endometriosis. Join us as we share the stories of resilience, offer insights from experts, and foster a community of support for those affected by this often misunderstood condition. Whether you're newly diagnosed, a seasoned warrior, or seeking understanding, I hope this podcast is here to help empower you and uplift you on your journey. Tune in as we break the silence, shatter stigmas, and amplify the voices of the endometriosis community. Medical disclaimer: this podcast is not intended for the purpose of providing medical advice. All information, content, and material of this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to serve as a substitute for the consultation, diagnosis, and/or medical treatment of a qualified physician or healthcare provider. Thank you so much for being here, and now on to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of the Cycle Podcast, the last one of 2025. I can't believe this year is already over. Happy holidays to everybody, and thank you so much for listening. If you've been a longtime listener or you're a new listener, really appreciate you being here. And I'd like to welcome Angie to the show from the UK. Angie, welcome. Thank you for being here. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
We're so grateful to have you. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so as you just said, I'm in the UK. Not very nice here today. Very grey, miserable, rainy, typical British weather. I'm working as well, so, glad it's Friday, basically.
I feel the same way. It has been a very busy week, and I can't wait for the weekend just to relax, that's for sure. Well, we appreciate you coming on, and I know you're a little under the weather and it's torrential raining there. So we're very grateful that you're here. Well, I always like to start of like the beginning of when you started to notice maybe something was going wrong or the start of this like journey with endometriosis.
Okay, so it was probably when I was at school, really, in secondary school or high school, as you may call it in the US. I just didn't feel like the way that I was feeling with my periods was normal. I'd started my periods quite young as well, sort of age 10, and they were always really heavy, really painful. And when I was at senior school, I was kind of taking a week at a time off when I was in my cycle, and I was in so much pain. I was literally laying on the sofa, unable to function, unable to do anything. And my mum kind of said to me, "This isn't normal. Let's take you to the doctor." And that's kind of where it all started. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's good that you both noticed that this was not normal, especially missing school and things like that. I feel like those are some really early indicators that something
Yeah.
is off. What happened when you went to the doctor?
Well, the doctor, back then there wasn't very much knowledge really of endometriosis. Obviously, I'd never heard of it personally. And he just kind of sent me for some tests, but put me on the contraceptive pill because I think his sort of the route he was taking me was thinking that by taking the contraceptive pill, it would obviously stop me having periods when I wanted to and stop the bleeding and, kind of go down that route, which I don't feel now was the correct route to take. But obviously, but you don't know, you're relying on a GP to kind of guide you to know these things, but they don't necessarily. Looking back now, it is not the route I'd have taken if I'd have known what I know now. But yeah, that's kind of how it started. He referred me to like a gynecologist, and I went for all the usual tests. But it took quite some time, obviously, to get a diagnosis. Probably about 5 years, I'd imagine, something like that. So yeah, obviously.
How old were you at that point when you got the diagnosis?
I was in my early 20s when I got the diagnosis. So yeah, from sort of 16 to sort of 21, 22, kind of around that sort of area of age.
Yeah. Did the pill help with your symptoms or anything?
Well, it did for a little while, but then it's like my body kind of got used to it. And also, when I did come off of the pill, because I was on it for a long period of time without a break, which obviously is not advised now at all. But again, I suppose it's a case of they've learnt that as the years have gone on through, medical, research and, how it affects people. And as soon as I stopped taking it and used alternative contraceptive, my periods were absolutely horrendous. And the pain, it seemed to be like a lot worse than it had been before. So I don't feel that it helped in that sense
Yeah,
in
I
the
had a
long
very
term.
similar
Yeah.
experience as you. Was on it for a really long time and
Mm.
straight through, or there also were the ones where it was like you took 4 months and then you had a period and then whatever that period was in the fourth month, it was like so awful. I couldn't move for like a week
Yeah.
because it was like you took the pill straight through. I can't remember what it was called, but that was like one of the
Yeah.
popular ones
Yeah.
during the time. But yeah, very similar to you. When I came off of it, it felt like things almost were worse for
Yeah.
me.
Definitely.
So, what did you do after you received the diagnosis? Did you have a surgery that diagnosed you, or how did
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I had some scans to start with, and they thought that there were abnormalities, but were very vague about what that was. And then I went for a laparoscopy, which obviously was when they found the endometriosis, and they tried to remove some of it. I was already at this point in time at quite a late stage of endometriosis by the time it had been found. And they actually
Yeah,
told me at that point that if I was thinking of having children, it would be a good idea to have them sooner rather than later because obviously of how it was affecting my fertility. So that was quite heavy going as well at the time to be told that after, only just really finding out that I had endometriosis kind of thing. So yeah,
yeah. And at that time, you probably didn't even really know what it meant. I don't know. I didn't know when I didn't even know what the word was when I first
no,
heard it.
it was such a lot to
And
take on board. I was given a leaflet and told read that because there was just no knowledge there of really what it was, what help could be
yeah,
given. I just went away thinking, what am I supposed to do now? Sort of thing.
yeah,
And then obviously on top of that, to have to go away and consider with my partner, are we going to do this? Are we going to try for a child with the knowledge that we may not be successful because it's obviously quite bad already? Or do we leave it and just see if we are lucky when we were going to maybe start considering to have children? So there was just so much all at once to kind of process and make decisions on. It was a really hard time.
yeah. That's a lot, and especially in your early 20s to just,
Yeah.
that's supposed to be like a fun, you're still having a fun time and going out with friends and not having to like have these heavy things looming over your head.
Yeah. Life changing decisions to make kind of
Yeah.
what felt like quite quickly. The clock was ticking, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like there's just so much more knowledge now that,
Oh,
that
definitely.
advice wasn't even accurate at that time to say you
No.
have to do it now, but they didn't have the knowledge like you said. So
Yeah.
what did you end up doing after that?
Well, it kind of put a lot of pressure on my relationship with my partner at the time because obviously we were quite young and we both did decide that we didn't want to leave it to chance after much sort of tears and tantrums, I suppose, between us of, what, you go through the whole, why are we up against this? This isn't fair and what do we do? And because it's a massive life decision. But we decided to try for a baby and see if we'd be lucky enough, for me to fall pregnant. And I was quite lucky. I fell pregnant within about 6 months, something like that. And I did go on to have my daughter, who to this day I call my miracle baby because she literally is. But I know how lucky I am to have been in that position. And also, obviously, it transpired later on because I ended up having a full hysterectomy when I was 30. And at that point, they removed such a massive, like a big mass from against my womb and ovaries that I wouldn't have conceived sort of again. So if I'd left it, I probably would never have had any children. So to me, it kind of tells me that my gut instinct was correct at the time, that although it was all very rushed and I was still very young, I wouldn't have been lucky enough to have had the child that I have now if I had have left it. So,
Yeah, yeah, and it's a lot. I mean, it's really heavy,
yeah,
and now we know too, later in time too that a lot of time doctors they want to go right to hysterectomy, and it's not a cure. That's an old
No,
wives' tale of it doesn't cure the disease. You can still have it
no,
even if
it
you have a
doesn't.
hysterectomy.
Yeah, for me, it was the decision to. I actually approached my consultant and asked for the hysterectomy because of my pain levels, and I had tried literally everything you could imagine, every hormone treatment, coil, patch, potion, lotion, you name it. I had tried it, and I basically got to that stage and said to the consultant, we all know that whether it's now or in 10 years, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to end up needing to have
Yeah.
hysterectomy to see if it does help with my pain levels because it was unbearable.
Yeah.
He didn't want
It's
to
such a
agree to
person.
it, but
Oh,
they
he
did.
didn't.
They did. So, and yeah, it did help with my pain. So again, very luckily, um, I haven't had all of that to deal with since having the hysterectomy. And I know other ladies aren't as lucky. They can have this hysterectomy, like you said, and still, end up after a matter of weeks back in as much pain as they were before. But it's kind of one thing I have noticed is, everyone is just different. Their journey with endometriosis is so different. So what works for one person won't work for another. You just don't know. It's a very individual journey with a lot of hard decisions of your own, process of pain relief and, fertility, everything.
It really is. It really is. And I wonder if you had adenomyosis too. I wonder if since you got such relief, I wonder if you had that as well.
Possibly. I mean, yeah. You know what it's like.
Yeah,
You don't get told by your
I
health
know.
professionals half of the stuff that's the matter unless you get a copy of your medical records and have a good read. That's when it all sort of
Or
comes to light.
yeah, or if they do the pathology, sometimes they don't even do the pathology, so
No,
you don't even know. Yeah.
no.
How did you feel after you had your daughter? You must have gone back right into pain, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, obviously it was horrendous because after I'd had her, my periods came back with a vengeance. The pain came back with a vengeance. And I kind of said, because I had the whole thing where I had doctors say to me, where I'd gone through all these other hormone patches and coils, and why don't you just have another baby? And I said, well, for one, why are you telling people to do that? I'm somebody who's had trouble having one child. I've been lucky enough to do that, but that's not the sort of advice you should be throwing out, to people at all. It's irresponsible. A child is a big commitment, if you are lucky enough to have one. And not only that, it's proved I've had one child and it didn't help. So why are you advising me, even if I could, to have another one? It's not going to help
Yeah.
with my endometriosis. And I was just kind of flabbergasted by the fact of how are they allowed to sit there and say this to people? It's just so irresponsible and incorrect.
Yeah, that's a good term. It's irresponsible. I agree
Yeah,
with you. Yeah.
yeah,
And incorrect. Exactly. Exactly that. And so, well, you said that you really had to push and that your doctor didn't want to do the hysterectomy. For
yeah.
people who are listening who are maybe in a similar scenario, what did you do? How did you advocate for yourself to be able to get that?
I was just determined that, I did the whole sort of this is my body. I know it better than anyone and I have the right to request this. And, a lot of the time they don't want to do it in the UK because of the amount of money that it costs, because obviously we get it done on the NHS. And I was kind of like, you cannot sit there and tell me that all of these other things are going to work because I've tried pretty much everything you've asked me to try. Where else can we go? And I said, I know you're going to not be able to tell me. You know as well as I do that this is the kind of end of the road. So I'd rather have it now than later because I can try and get on with my life. At the moment, I'm not living any sort of life. I'm always in pain. My periods are all over the place. I can't function, and I can't deal with being put on all of these different things like a guinea pig, really, that don't work and they're not really helping. So yeah. And I've always been very, very determined in telling them that they don't know my body like I do. And it's very easy for them to sit there and say, well, I don't want to do that. And I would say, well, you wouldn't want to live with this pain either. Have you got any idea what I'm going through? Have you got any idea what this is like? No, you haven't. Kind of. So I'm probably, there was probably this big red sticker on my file of she's very feisty, she's very, determined. But I think that's how you have to be. You've got to be prepared to go in there and have a bit of a fight, so to speak, a bit of a fight, fight for your rights kind of thing, for what's best for you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's okay to even be, maybe you are labeled feisty and you have a big red sticker, but you've felt better after and you
Yeah.
had quality of life. It's your life. It's
Yes.
not their life. Like
Exactly.
you said, you know your body the best.
Yeah. And you wait so long for these appointments, or in the UK, you definitely do. You can wait for months or years to get an appointment, and to then be, just disregarded as, it's not as bad as you're saying it is, or it can't be that bad, or, why don't you just do this, or why don't you just do that? It's very, it makes you so angry and frustrated sitting in there with your little 15-minute slot of that, they're looking at their watch and they want to get you out for the next person. And you're kind of like, the whole time you're disregarding me, I've got to live my life still. I've got to go away and try and find a way to cope with this pain and this, how it affects you mentally, physically. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. We've had several people on the podcast from the UK that have waited a year, 2 years,
Yeah.
3 years to get into these appointments to see
Yeah.
specialists. And like you said, they get 15 minutes
You
to
do.
kind of plead their case. And that's also really challenging. Like you said, you're struggling just trying
Yeah.
to get help and they're rushing you and you're like, "Do you know how long I waited to get
Yeah.
in to see you?"
Exactly.
Yeah, it's really challenging. Well, how have you been, what have you been up to since post hysterectomy? How are you feeling? Did you have to do any hormone replacement? Or, kind of what happened after that?
Yeah, obviously, I had to go on a hormone replacement treatment, patches, because I'm a bit weird and tablets don't get into my system quick enough for how I need them. So I was on a very
Mm-hmm.
high dosage of patch, probably for about 5 years. And then again, I noticed it wasn't working very well. So I did what they say, don't do this at home. I took myself off of it cold turkey for about 4 weeks, then went back to the doctor and said what I'd done. He wasn't very impressed, but I said, well, I've got to come off of it at some point, and it isn't working for me now. You're not going to be able to give me anything else because I'm on the very highest dosage. Let's just leave it at that. And that's kind of what I've done.
And how are you feeling or how do you feel now?
Yeah,
How are
yeah.
things?
I feel okay. Obviously, they warned me that at the time of having my hysterectomy that your body ages slightly quicker because you've had a hysterectomy that bit earlier. I felt, in comparison to how I used to feel, I would say I feel 95% better. And I'm not dealing with that pain every day. I've been very lucky. I'm able to kind of live a much more normal life. So for me, it was the right decision, 100%. Don't regret it
Yeah.
at all. They also obviously say to you, about how it's going to affect your mental health having a hysterectomy, because a lot of ladies who haven't been as lucky as I was to have a child, obviously it's devastating because you'll never have that opportunity if you've had the full hysterectomy.
Yeah.
But obviously I didn't have that, and I was in quite a positive mindset about it. I didn't need to have any counselling, or because they do offer that now afterwards, but I was quite lucky. I didn't need to have any of that either. So
Yeah. And so you decided to write a book about this, which is how we
yes,
met.
yeah.
And what inspired you to write a book about your story?
Well, I volunteer for one of the UK charities, Endometriosis UK, and I'm on the helpline. So I'm talking on the phone to support. I do it every week. So I support ladies, obviously. Well, it's not just people who have endometriosis, it's their partners that call in, their mums, their sisters, their aunties, because they all want to understand and help, which is great. Listening to the stories, I just thought, is it time that I shared my journey? Because it could help somebody. Because I've picked up things along the way. little tips, I suppose, and things that might help someone else. And the fact that I can put on paper in such a way that they know that I understand what they're going through, because obviously I do, I've been there myself. So that's kind of why I decided to do it. I felt it was time to give something back. So that's where it all kind of started, really. And yeah, published the book. The publisher obviously wanted to go with it, which was great. And here we are.
And here we are. Well, if you're watching the video, which is a plug, you can watch it on Spotify or YouTube. I'm holding it up right now. So it's Endometriosis. We are all warriors. And mine came with a little bookmark. So don't be jealous, everyone. I'll link it in the show notes. But Angie, I also think it's incredible. We don't have a helpline here in the US, but I do follow Endometriosis UK. I think they do so many amazing things for patients and with work and the helpline. And I just feel they're doing such wonderful work. And I think that's amazing that you volunteer for the helpline. Maybe tell us a little bit more about, obviously you can't tell us the people you talk to and what you talk about, but tell us, what it's like on the helpline and what are people asking, and do you get a lot of phone calls? And if people are listening and they're in the UK, can they call? If they're somewhere else, can they call? How does it work?
I mean, I get a variation of different calls. It might be somebody who just wants to talk to someone who understands, as in they don't want any answers, they just want someone to listen for them. Unfortunately, you get a lot of people that do get really upset, so that can be hard sometimes, but we understand why. They might be ringing up to ask questions, that they've got about the process. If they've just been newly diagnosed, they might be trying to find out the best route to take to get diagnosed. And on the Endometriosis UK website, there's loads of different stuff on there. They've got like a symptoms checker for someone if they do think they've got it. Frequently asked questions, things to ask at appointments. The charity also runs support groups. I'm just in the process of, I've done my training to be a support group leader now. So there's kind of, in my area, there's a gap of an area where there's an area over here and over here, but nowhere here that kind of deals with in person. They're all over the UK, these groups. So if someone does want to go in person and talk to others who have got endometriosis and kind of get the support, they can. So the charity are always going to Parliament about things. They do a lot of stuff with employers, getting employers to understand, putting things in place for people at work who've got endometriosis, allowing them time for their appointments. Yeah, they're always doing stuff, honestly.
It's absolutely incredible. And I love the in-person kind of group meetups, and that they notice where there's gaps and that you're going to lead one. And what such a beautiful way to give back for what you've been through, and the helpline and just all of the things. I think it's so needed, but I also just think it's incredible that they've really achieved a lot, I feel like, and it's something to really be proud of. And hopefully we have more of that come over here across the pond soon.
Yeah, that would be great.
I know there's a lot of organizations, doing things, but I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. And with the work, just advocating for workplaces and things like that really need to be done.
Yeah, it's really going well over here with what they're doing. They're getting lots of different employers to come on board and have the training and the support, so that's been really good, really positive.
Really, really incredible. And as someone who would have loved that help back when I started going through it, thank you for volunteering your time to do that. Seriously, it's a big impact. It makes such a big difference to just have someone listen that understands, because that's very hard to find.
It is. And that's what a lot of the people calling in say. We're so glad that we found you. And we have a lot of mums call in about their daughters and partners who don't understand why their wife or girlfriend is like they are. It's very different. Every call is very different. I couldn't say that any of my calls have all been the same, but it goes back to what we were saying about how everybody's endometriosis journey is very different. Yeah.
That's part of the reason I do this podcast, is because I just like talking to patients about their story, because someone may relate to a piece of somebody else's story, but I've never heard a same story or a similar story. It's all very different. The treatment's very different for everyone, reactions to medication. I mean, just all of it, it's very different. We're all very individual, and there's not a one size fits all, unfortunately, for this condition. So like you said you felt like a guinea pig at one point, and I feel like that's what it was. There's just a lot of testing of things, like what works, what doesn't work. And that makes it even more challenging because you're doing something that you may have a side effect to, and then it makes you even worse. I mean, it's very challenging, though I think it's come a long way in my time of living with it and dealing with it. It's a lot more awareness, a lot more advocacy, but I still think we have a long way to go.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Well, Angie, anything else you want to add, or tips or tricks or advice or anything for the endo warriors listening or their family members or supporters?
I would just say, well, it's not easy to say, but try and stay strong and kind of advocate for yourself. Make sure that you're happy with the answers you're getting. If you're not, push. You know, if it comes to it, get a second opinion, whatever. Don't ever feel bad. Don't ever think you've got to accept what you're being told, because, like we've said more than once now, we're all different. So it could be that they're just comparing you to somebody else they've spoken to, and it might not be what's best for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really great advice. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and being vulnerable with us, and for all the hard work you do over in the UK helping patients, and for, writing a book and telling your story. I'll link it again, like I said, in the show notes, but I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Thanks for having me on. I've really enjoyed it.
We've really enjoyed having you. And thank you everyone so much for listening. Please rate us in Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening to this. Thumbs up on YouTube, and have a wonderful rest of the year. Happy holidays, happy new year. And we will see you we're going to take January off. So we'll see you in February or March of 2026. Thank you again. Thank you so much for listening. And Angie, thank you so much for being on.
Thanks, guys.